Happy Monday. Thank you for joining me for this week's Unlocking the Magic of Leadership. Now, I have a really big surprise for you in that I've invited one of my friends and colleagues, Courtney Ramsey, to join us for this week and next week's version of Unlocking the Magic of Leadership. Now, we are going into week 4 of our series on neurodivergence, and a quick reminder as we go into it. There is a huge spectrum of neurodivergence, what it means, and how it shows up. We are narrowing that down and that we are only talking about adults in the workplace. So that tends to mean adults that are high functioning in the workplace. So as we're going through this series, if we say or do something that is inaccurate, make sure and let us know. We're learning right alongside with you. We want to make sure that this series is as inclusive as possible. We may drop the ball. We try really hard not to, but we may drop the ball. If we do, pick it up, pass it to us, and tell us how we can do better. I guarantee you I will do my best to fix it in the future. All right, so back to Courtney Ramsey. She is going to be in week 4 and week 5 talking about ADHD, what it means, how it shows up, and how you, whether you have it or know someone who has it, can learn more about it and better adapt. So without further ado, let's bring in Courtney.
Hi there, everyone. Today we are diving into a topic that is often misunderstood, but in my opinion, at least, very, very important. And that is ADHD in adults, specifically high functioning ADHD in adults and at work. So what does high functioning even mean? Well, to be honest, it's not an official diagnosis, but it's a really good way to describe those people who can really mask or manage or even compensate for their ADHD symptoms really effectively. Now, on the surface, these people might look like they have all their stuff together. They might be really on top of things, but underneath the surface, there is a whole lot going on, and there's a lot of effort to look and show up the way they do. And as you can imagine, yes, I am one of those people. I mean, I often get the feedback that I am so polished and so professional and so confident looking. And I gotta say, not really. Like, if you just knew what the floor beneath me looked like, if you just knew the pajama pants I was wearing right now, you would have a whole different side of the picture, right? Now, I originally learned that I was ADHD about 2 years ago. Now, y'all, I'm over 45. I'm just gonna leave it there, right? So let me just say, I have had to compensate my entire life, not really understanding that I had ADHD. And the reason I even put 2 and 2 together is because my son has exhibited symptoms of neurodiversity since birth. I mean, I could tell this was just a child who reacted to things differently since he was about 6 months old. So around age 5 or 6, when he was going to school, doing the whole kindergarten first grade thing, we took him in to get assessed. And of course, we found out that he was ADHD. So I started doing more and more research on it. And so many of the adult symptoms, specifically those of ones who were adult women, really applied to me. So I went back and had the same doctor check me out. And sure enough, I too was diagnosed. So that is my story. And I tell you that so you know really loud and clear, I don't claim to be an expert on ADHD. What I'm telling you about today is what I know to be true for myself. And I'm sure it applies to many others, but it may not apply to you if you have ADHD. And it may not apply to everyone on your team who is neurodiverse in this way. So all that being said, let's start breaking it down. So high functioning ADHD, like I said before, is all about navigating those same symptoms that you think about with typical ADHD, like inattention, impulsivity, the inability to focus, right? But unlike people who are not high functioning, these people have all the strategies in place to help them minimize the visible impact ADHD might have on their lives. So when you think about that, people with high functioning ADHD are more than likely holding down really fantastic jobs. They are probably making bank. They're in school. They probably have really great grades. They are keeping up, or at least appearing to keep up or do even better than certain people. But I need you to know it's taking so much effort for them to do all that. When my son got his diagnosis, the way the doctor described his brain to me was almost like a Ferrari race car with like flat tires. So think of a car that has an amazing engine, or the brain, right? So much potential to go fast and do amazing things, but it has flat tires. So the whole time, just to even move a little bit of distance is super hard. And of course, it can be super slow along the way too. And I really think that makes a lot of sense. That's such a perfect way to describe the ADHD brain. So many ADHD people I know are super smart and capable of so much. It just takes a lot of effort for them to do the things that neurotypical people are doing. Now, to compensate, they might use different tools or routines, or even just use like pure adrenaline and hyper focus to get things done. But as you can imagine, that constant need to be hyper functioning and always trying a bit harder, that can lead to a lot of stress and anxiety and even burnout at work. It can also lead to some negative impacts on personal relationships. So let's take a deeper dive into all that. And we're going to start with, what does ADHD look like at work? What are some of the things that you might see or hear if you are working with someone who is high functioning ADHD? First of all, disorganization. Like if I told you again what my desk looked like right now that you can't see, or the floor behind me, or the shelf of books I have, you would be really scared. For me, that can often show up as not being able to find the things I need when I actually need them. Like I'm that girl who's going to take 30 minutes looking for something and I can't find it. Then of course it's going to show up 2 days later when I bought a new one to compensate, right? It can also feel like it's just hard to stay organized and even have the capacity and the willpower to organize. Like I will put off a junk drawer forever until it's practically impossible. And only when it won't close, then I'm going to organize that junk drawer, right? Now, the next thing that you might see or hear is a lot of procrastination. And that looks like absolutely putting things off until the very last minute and then using that adrenaline boost to get things done. And this is totally me. My brain likes to prioritize what is immediately ahead of it. So for example, if I have a speaking engagement next week, I'm focusing on that. I'm not focusing on the speaking engagement 2 months from now, even though that one might be the harder one for me to do because I have to build out completely brand new content. Now, the good news is I always get my things done. I have a very strong sense of responsibility and justice. So I want to get things done. And if I make a promise, I will get it done. It just might mean I'm doing it at the very last minute after pulling an all-nighter. The next thing is difficulty prioritizing. This is especially true for me when I have really big, long projects with lots of different steps, because I look at all that I have to do and I'm overwhelmed on where I even need to start, which of course causes more stress, more anxiety, and more procrastination. Yeah, you guessed it. Because again, to me, everything is important. So I don't really know where to start, especially when things appear to be a mountain, right? Next up, easily distracted. When you hear people say like squirrel, right, and they're looking off to the right, that is me to a T. I have to really actively work to manage my attention so I don't do what I call ping pong brain, which is I'm working on something and then ping, something will pop up and it'll make me like jump over here to that thing. And then I go down that rabbit hole and I never come back to this thing. Then something else pops up and I go to that one over there. And it's this never ending vicious cycle. Now, what that can feel like for many of us is that we are always working super hard, but we just aren't accomplishing all that much. We're never checking things off of that checklist. It can be really, really disheartening. Next up is hyperfocus. Now, this can be a good and bad thing because on the flip side, when something does grab my attention, I can be so into that thing. I will like find my flow and be in the zone and tune out everything else. But as you can imagine, that can also be a problem because if I'm dropping everything else to focus on this one thing, that other project or task can fall through the cracks, or sometimes that other thing that I'm dropping, it's an actual person. And that can lead to that person feeling neglected or ignored. So sometimes these traits can be really, really good things, but sometimes they can lead to a lot of challenges.